There is a silent exhaustion most people carry, not the kind that comes from hard work, but the kind that comes from working endlessly and still feeling stuck. You wake up, you move, you trade your time for money, and at the end of the day, the numbers don't reflect the effort, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet question starts forming. What if this isn't the way it's supposed to be? What if working harder is not the answer? What if the real problem is not how much you work, but how your money works? Because here is the truth most people avoid. If your income depends on your presence, your freedom has a ceiling, and ceilings don't break themselves. In this audiobook, Make Money by Not Working. How to make money without working? You're going to step into a completely different way of thinking. Not about quitting effort, not about chasing shortcuts, but about repositioning your effort so it builds something that continues without you. This is not fantasy. This is structure. This is not hype. This is discipline applied differently. And yes, this is educational content, not financial advice, because the goal here is not to tell you what to invest in, but to show you how to think like someone who no longer trades life for income. Over the next chapters, you will discover how the wealthy quietly escape the income trap, how assets are built to produce income long after the work is done, how leverage, when used correctly, becomes acceleration, not risk, how systems replace effort, how patience outperforms urgency, and how identity determines your financial reality. Because the game is not about money. It has never been about money. It is about control. Control of time, control of attention, control of decisions. And here is your first truth, your first line to carry with you. You don't become free when you earn more. You become free when your money stops asking for your time. Pause on that. Let it settle. Because if that sentence feels uncomfortable, it means you're starting to see something differently. And that is where everything begins. If even one part of this journey resonates with you, make a quiet contract with yourself right now. Not with me, not with anyone else, with yourself. Commit to listening fully. Commit to thinking deeply. Commit to acting differently when this ends. And if you choose to like or share this audiobook later, do it for one reason, because you recognize someone else is still trapped in the same loop you're about to break. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Working for Money. There is a belief most people never question. It is taught early, reinforced daily, and defended unconsciously. The belief is simple. You work to earn money. Sounds logical, right? But that belief is also the trap, because when you accept that model without questioning it, you unknowingly accept something else, that your income is limited by your time, and time is the one resource that never expands. You can learn more skills. You can earn more per hour. You can work longer days. But you cannot create more hours. And yet, millions of people build their entire financial life around that limitation. Think about it. Every raise still requires your presence. Every promotion still depends on your availability. Even high-income careers still collapse when the work stops. That is not freedom. That is a better paid version of dependence. The system doesn't break you overnight. It trains you slowly. It rewards you just enough to stay, just enough to keep believing. And before you realize it, years pass. Effort increases, income grows, but freedom stays exactly the same. This is what the most successful builders understand early. Something hinted at in works like The Asset Game, where the shift from earning to owning becomes the defining move. Because the real question is not, how much can I earn? The real question is, what can I build that earns without me? That question changes everything. It shifts your focus from activity to creation, from movement to structure, from effort to leverage. And here's where most people hesitate, because building something that works without you requires a different kind of thinking. It requires patience, clarity, and the willingness to delay immediate rewards for long-term control. That is uncomfortable because we live in a world that celebrates speed, fast money, fast results, fast recognition. But the systems that create lasting income are built slowly, quietly, often invisibly. And this is where the first transformation begins, not in your bank account, but in your perspective. You start to see your job differently, not as your solution, but as your funding source. You start to see money differently, not as something to spend, but as something to position. And you start to see time differently, not as something to fill, but as something to protect and multiply. Because every hour you spend working only for money is an hour not spent building something that could work for you. And this is not about quitting your job tomorrow. That would be reckless. This is about something far more powerful. Awareness. Because once you see the structure, you cannot unsee it. Once you understand the trap, you cannot pretend it isn't there. And that awareness creates tension, a quiet tension between the life you're living and the life you realize is possible. That tension is not a problem. It is a signal that you are ready to think differently. Now, here's something important. Most people, when they hear make money without working, imagine laziness. They imagine doing nothing and getting everything. That mindset will destroy you, because the truth is the opposite. To build income that works without you, you must first work in a way most people never will. You must build something, a system, an asset, a structure, and that takes focus, discipline, consistency. Because passive income is not passive in creation, it is only passive in result. And that difference separates those who dream from those who build. Let me say that again, because this matters. Passive income is built actively, so it can operate passively. If that line hits you, hold on to it, because in the next chapter, we're going to break down the real difference between what makes people busy and what actually makes them wealthy. And once you see that difference clearly, you will never look at money the same way again. Good. Let's continue. Dear viewer, we now have over 150 videos on our channel. That's a huge number, and we want to thank you, our viewers and subscribers, so much for that. You inspire us to create great videos every time and choose the best topics for our audiobooks. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to do so. We have big plans for this channel. Thank you. Chapter 2. Busy versus wealthy. The hidden divide. There are two people walking through life. Both wake up early, both work hard, both feel tired at the end of the day. From the outside, they look identical. But their futures are moving in completely different directions. One is getting closer to freedom. The other is getting deeper into dependence. And the difference is not effort. It is what that effort is building. Most people are trained to stay busy. Busy answering emails, busy completing tasks, busy solving problems that reset every single day, busy but not progressing. Because being busy creates the illusion of movement. But movement is not the same as growth. Let that sit for a moment. You can move all day and still go nowhere. The wealthy understand something most people never stop to question. If your work disappears when you stop, you're not building wealth. You are maintaining motion, and maintenance does not multiply. This is why some people can work for 20 years and still feel like they're starting over every month. Because nothing they do accumulates, nothing compounds, nothing continues. Now compare that to someone building assets. Every action has a different intention, not just to complete, but to create something that remains, a digital product, a business system, an investment structure, a piece of intellectual property, a platform, a network. Something that does not reset to zero when the day ends. This is the real divide, not rich versus poor, not lucky versus unlucky, but builders versus maintainers. And here's where it becomes uncomfortable, because being a builder requires something most people avoid: delayed gratification. You might work today and see no immediate result. You might invest time, energy, focus, and nothing comes back right away. That feels wrong to someone conditioned to immediate exchange. Work leads to get paid. Effort leads to reward. But builders operate on a different timeline. They understand something deeper. What you build today may not pay you today, but it might pay you for the next 10 years. That is a completely different game, and it requires a different level of patience. This is why many people never transition, not because they're incapable, but because they're uncomfortable with the delay. They want certainty. They want quick feedback. They want visible progress. But real leverage is often invisible at first, and that invisibility tests your discipline. There's a line of thinking echoed in financial teachings around leverage and borrowing that, when used intentionally, resources can accelerate outcomes rather than trap you. But here's the part most people miss. Leverage is not just about money. It is about structure. You can leverage systems. You can leverage technology. You can leverage people. You can leverage content. You can leverage code. And in 2025, this matters more than ever because the world has changed. You are no longer limited to physical output. One piece of content can reach millions. One system can serve thousands. One idea can scale globally. The tools exist. The access exists. The opportunity exists. But the mindset is still stuck, still trading time, still measuring success by hours worked, still chasing activity instead of impact. And this is where your shift begins. You start asking different questions. Not, what should I do today? But, what can I build today that will still work tomorrow? Not, how can I earn more this week? But, how can I create something that earns repeatedly? And these questions will feel unfamiliar at first. That's normal, because you're stepping out of a system designed for repetition into a mindset designed for creation. And creation requires thinking, clarity, focus. It requires you to step back and see the bigger picture, because if you don't, you will stay trapped in cycles that feel productive, but lead nowhere. Now here's something powerful. You don't need to quit your current life to begin this shift. You just need to reallocate your attention. Even 1 hour a day can begin changing everything. A concept reinforced in performance-focused thinking where small, consistent time investments compound over time. 1 hour to learn, 1 hour to build, 1 hour to think. not consume, not scroll, not distract, but build. Because over time, those hours stack, and what you build in those hours becomes the bridge out of dependence. This is not about working less immediately. This is about working differently so that one day you don't have to work the same way at all. And here is your next line, your next anchor. Busy fills your day. Building changes your life. If that resonates, hold on to it, because in the next chapter, we are going to go deeper into something even more powerful. The concept that separates those who stay stuck from those who quietly build income that works without them. We're going to talk about ownership. And once you understand what it truly means to own, you will start to see why effort alone is never enough. Good, stay with it, because this is where the shift becomes real. Chapter 3. Ownership, the silent engine of freedom. There is a word that quietly separates two worlds, a word that most people hear, but very few truly understand. That word is ownership. Not ownership of things that lose value, not ownership of status symbols, not ownership for appearance, but ownership of income-producing structures. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. You can work for 10 years and own nothing that pays you back, or you can spend those same 10 years building things that continue paying you long after the work is done. That is the difference. Ownership is not about control over objects. It is about control over cash flow. And once you understand that, your entire focus changes. You stop chasing income and you start chasing assets. Now let's slow this down, because this is where most people get confused. An asset is not something you like. It is not something you enjoy. It is not something that looks good. An asset is something that puts money into your life consistently without requiring your constant effort. That's it. Simple, but not easy, because the world is designed to push you in the opposite direction, to spend, to upgrade, to consume, to turn every dollar into something that feels good now, but costs you later. And that's how people stay stuck. They build lifestyles instead of building assets. And lifestyles are expensive to maintain. Assets are expensive to ignore. Let that sink in. Because every dollar you spend is either building your future or feeding your present. And if most of your money goes to feeding your present, your future stays underdeveloped. Now think about this carefully. What do you currently own that pays you even when you're not working? Pause. Be honest. Because this is not about judgment. It's about awareness. And awareness creates direction. The wealthy ask a different question every time they earn. How can I turn this into something that keeps paying me? Not immediately, not emotionally, but strategically. They think in layers. They think in systems. They think in ownership loops. This is something reflected in the concept of building income that continues without your presence. The shift from effort to ownership is where real leverage begins. Because when you own something that produces income, you are no longer starting from zero every day. You are building on top of yesterday. And that is how momentum is created. Let's break this into something practical. There are different forms of ownership in today's world. Digital ownership, content that generates revenue over time. Courses, books, media platforms, business ownership, systems that operate with or without you, teams, processes, automations, investment ownership, assets that grow or produce returns, real estate, equity, markets. And here's the key. You don't need all of them. You just need to start with one one direction, one system, one asset, because trying to do everything leads to doing nothing. Focus builds power, and power builds leverage. Now here's where most people hesitate again. They say, I don't have enough money to invest. But ownership does not always start with money. It often starts with skill and time. You can build digital assets with knowledge. You can build systems with understanding. You can build opportunities through positioning. Money accelerates, but it is not always the starting point. The real starting point is this: a decision to stop consuming and start creating. Because as long as your primary role in the system is consumption, you will always need to work to sustain it. But when you shift into creation, you begin building things that can sustain you, and this is where discipline comes in. Not the kind that forces you to work harder, but the kind that forces you to think deeper, to delay gratification, to say no to easy choices, to stay focused when results are invisible. Because building ownership often feels like nothing is happening. At first, you put in effort, you create something, you invest time, and there is no immediate reward. That silence breaks most people. They stop, they doubt, they go back to what feels safe. But the ones who continue, the ones who stay consistent, they reach a point where something shifts, where the asset begins to respond, where the system begins to produce, where the effort begins to echo. And that is when everything changes, because now you are no longer working for money. Money has started working for you. And that moment, that shift, is something you will never forget. Here's your next line. Ownership turns effort into echo. Think about that, because in the next chapter, we're going to break down something even more powerful, something that accelerates everything you've just learned, something most people fear, but the wealthy quietly master. We're going to talk about leverage, and once you understand how to use it correctly, you will realize why some people move 10 times faster with half the effort. Good. Now we step into something most people misunderstand and therefore never use correctly. The Chapter 4. Leverage, the force multiplier nobody teaches properly. There is a word that makes people uncomfortable, a word that carries fear, risk, and hesitation. That word is leverage. And for most people, leverage sounds dangerous because they've only seen it used poorly. They've seen debt destroy people. They've seen pressure break people. They've seen decisions made without discipline lead to collapse, so they avoid it completely. But here's the truth. Leverage is not dangerous. Misuse is dangerous. And avoiding leverage entirely is like refusing to use fire because it can burn. Yes, it can destroy, but it can also build, cook, power, and transform. The difference is not the tool. It is the mind using it. Now let's redefine leverage in a way that actually serves you. Leverage is anything that allows you to achieve more without increasing your personal effort in the same proportion. Let that land. More output without equal input. That is power. And in today's world, leverage exists everywhere. But most people only recognize one type: money, borrowing capital, taking loans, using credit. And yes, financial leverage can be powerful, but it is only one form. There is also time leverage, using systems and automation to free your hours. Skill leverage, using knowledge that scales beyond your personal effort. Technology leverage, using tools, AI, platforms to multiply output. People leverage, working with others to expand capacity. Content leverage, creating once and distributing infinitely. When you begin to see leverage this way, your world expands, because now you are not limited to what you can do alone. You are building with force multipliers. Now, let's address the one people fear the most: money, debt, loans. Here is the truth most people were never taught. Debt used for consumption traps you. Debt used for creation can accelerate you. This idea is echoed in financial frameworks where borrowing is seen as a tool, not for lifestyle expansion, but for asset creation that outlives the cost. And that difference is everything. If you borrow money to buy something that loses value, you are paying interest on decline. That is a losing equation. But if you use borrowed money to acquire or build something that produces income, you are using leverage. You are accelerating ownership. You are compressing time. But here's the part people ignore. Leverage requires discipline, because leverage amplifies everything. Good decisions become better. Bad decisions become worse. Clear thinking becomes powerful. Emotional thinking becomes dangerous. So the question is not, should I use leverage? The real question is, am I disciplined enough to use it correctly? Because without discipline, leverage will expose you, and that is why many avoid it. Not because it doesn't work, but because it requires a higher level of control. Now let's bring this back to your journey. You don't need to rush into financial leverage. That is not the first step. The first step is learning how to leverage what you already have: your time, your attention, your skills. Start asking, how can I use 1 hour to create something that continues? How can I use what I know to build something that scales? How can I use tools to multiply my output? Because once you master small leverage, you prepare yourself for bigger leverage. And this is where momentum begins. You build one system, it works. You build another, it grows. You stack them, and suddenly your effort is no longer linear. It is exponential. And that is where the game changes, because now you are not just working. You are building forces that work beyond you. Here is your next line. Leverage is not about doing less. It's about making what you do count more. Let that stay with you, because in the next chapter, we are going to go deeper into something that controls everything we've talked about so far. Something invisible, but powerful. Something that determines whether you build assets or stay stuck in cycles. We are going to talk about your financial identity, because before money changes, your thinking must change. And that shift is where everything truly begins. Perfect. Now we move deeper, because this next shift is not about money. It's about who you are when money shows up. We'd also like to remind you that we have a private members community on our channel. All members can vote on the topic of the next video, have priority in the comments section, and, most importantly, gain access to exclusive videos and lessons covering the most relevant topics and information specific to this month. Thank you. Let's keep moving forward. Chapter 5. Your Financial Identity. The Invisible Ceiling. There is something shaping your financial life right now, even if you never named it. It's not your job. It's not your income. It's not your opportunities. It's your identity. The way you see money, the way you react to it, the way you think about earning, saving, spending, building, all of it is filtered through a silent belief system. And that system decides your ceiling. Because here is the truth. You will never consistently earn or keep more than what your identity believes is normal. Let that sink in. If deep down you believe money is hard to make, you will make it hard. If you believe wealth is for other people, you will subconsciously push it away. If you believe you must work constantly to deserve income, you will resist anything that earns without effort. That's the hidden block. Not lack of opportunity, not lack of knowledge, but internal resistance to a new reality. This is why some people get opportunities and sabotage them. Why some people earn more and lose it. Why some people learn but never apply. Because their identity hasn't caught up, and identity always wins. Now, here's something important. Your current identity is not your fault. It was shaped over time by environment, by upbringing, by conversations, by what you saw growing up. If you were surrounded by people trading time for money, that became normal. If you never saw assets being built, you never considered it possible. If money was always discussed with fear, you learned to associate it with stress, and without realizing it, you built a mental model that keeps you exactly where you are. But here's the power. What was built can be rebuilt. Identity is not fixed. It is trained. And once you start training it consciously, everything changes. Now let's challenge something directly. Most people say they want passive income, but emotionally, they don't believe in earning without effort. It feels wrong, unfair, unreal. So even when they have the chance to build something, they hesitate, they overthink, they delay, because it conflicts with what they've always believed. This is why mindset work is not optional. It is foundational. Because if your thinking stays the same, your actions will return to the same patterns, and patterns create outcomes. Now let's reframe your identity. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who works for money, you begin to see yourself as someone who builds systems. Instead of measuring your worth by hours worked, you measure it by value created. Instead of chasing income, you focus on designing income sources. This is not just a mindset shift, this is a role change. From worker to builder, from participant to strategist. And this shift affects everything. How you spend your time, how you use your money, how you make decisions. Because now you are not reacting to life. You are designing it. There's a principle often reflected in personal development teachings that transformation starts with ownership of your decisions and your direction, not external changes. And that applies here perfectly, because your financial life is not something that happens to you. It is something you construct. Now let's make this practical. Ask yourself, who am I when it comes to money? Am I reactive or intentional? Do I consume more than I create? Do I think short-term or long-term? Do I avoid complexity or learn it? These questions are not comfortable, but they are necessary because clarity creates direction, and direction creates progress. Now here's something powerful. You don't need to become a completely different person overnight. You just need to start making decisions that align with the identity you want to build. Small shifts, consistent actions, repeated over time. Because identity is not declared. It is proven through behavior. Every time you choose to build instead of consume, you reinforce it. Every time you invest instead of spend, you strengthen it. Every time you think long-term instead of short-term, you evolve it. And slowly, you become someone who naturally moves differently, thinks differently, builds differently, and eventually earns differently. Here's your next line. You don't rise to wealth, you align with it. Hold on to that, because in the next chapter, we're going to break down something that quietly controls your entire financial future. something most people ignore until it's too late. We're going to talk about cash flow, not just earning money, but controlling the direction it moves. Because money doesn't just appear or disappear, it flows. And once you understand how to direct that flow, you stop feeling stuck and start feeling in control. Good. Now we step into something that quietly decides everything, yet most people never track it with intention. Chapter 6. Cash Flow. The direction of your life in numbers. Money is not just something you earn. It is something that moves, and the direction it moves determines your future. Most people focus on how much they make. Very few focus on where it goes, and that is the blind spot. Because you can earn more and still move backward. You can get a raise and feel no difference. You can increase income and remain financially stuck. Why? Because income alone does not create freedom. Cash flow does. Let's simplify this. Every dollar that enters your life has only two possible directions. It can move toward your future or away from it. There is no neutral. Every expense, every decision, every habit is either building something or draining something, and most people never stop to observe this. They earn, they spend, they repeat, without awareness, without structure, without intention, and over time, that unconscious flow becomes a pattern that quietly defines their life. Now let's shift your perspective. Instead of asking, "How much did I make this month?" you begin asking, "How much of what I made is building something that will pay me back?" That question changes everything, because now you are not just tracking money, you are tracking direction. Now here's where it gets real. Most people have positive income, but negative cash flow direction, meaning they earn money, but most of it goes into things that do not return value. Subscriptions, upgrades, temporary experiences, status purchases, and while none of these are wrong, they become dangerous when they dominate your flow, because they create a life that constantly needs to be funded, a life that depends on continuous effort, and that is the opposite of freedom. Now imagine something different. Imagine that a portion of every dollar you earn is redirected, not into consumption, but into creation, into assets, into systems, into things that will eventually reduce your need to work. That is when the shift begins. Slow at first, almost invisible, but powerful, because over time, those small redirections compound, and eventually, they start to generate their own flow. Now here's the mindset you need to adopt. My income funds my escape from needing income. Read that again, because that is the strategy. Not to earn more just to spend more, but to earn more so you can redirect more. And redirection is a skill. It requires awareness. It requires discipline. It requires honesty. Because you will feel the pull, the urge to upgrade, to reward yourself, to follow what others are doing. That's normal. But every time you choose differently, you strengthen control, and control builds power. Now let's make this practical. You don't need to change everything overnight. You just need to create one rule. A percentage of everything you earn goes toward building assets. Non-negotiable. It doesn't matter if it's small. What matters is consistency, because consistency builds identity, and identity drives behavior. Over time, that percentage grows, and as it grows, so does your momentum. Now here's something most people overlook. Cash flow is not just about money, it's about attention. Where your focus goes, your life follows. If your attention is constantly on consumption, your actions will follow. If your attention is on creation, your results will reflect it. So managing cash flow also means managing focus. Where do you spend your mental energy? What do you think about daily? What do you prioritize? Because those patterns become financial outcomes. There's a deeper idea often reinforced in self-development that small, consistent daily focus compounds into life-changing results over time. And cash flow works the same way. Small decisions, repeated daily, creating long-term outcomes. Now here's your next line. Money doesn't disappear. It follows your habits. Let that stay with you. Because in the next chapter, we are going to talk about something that controls your ability to build everything we've discussed so far. Something most people underestimate. Something that determines whether you stay consistent or fall back into old patterns. We're going to talk about discipline, not the loud kind, not the motivational kind, but the quiet, relentless kind that builds systems even when nothing seems to be happening, and that is where real transformation begins. Good. Now we step into the part most people try to avoid, but without it, nothing you've heard so far will ever become real. Chapter 7. Discipline, the bridge between knowing and becoming. There is a gap, a silent, frustrating gap that most people live in for years, the gap between understanding and execution. You can learn everything about money. You can understand assets, leverage, cash flow. You can listen, read, study, and still nothing changes. Why? Because knowledge without discipline is potential without direction, and potential left unused becomes regret. Now here's the truth. Most people don't want to hear. You don't lack information. You lack consistency in applying it. That's the real problem. Because building income that works without you is not about one big move. It is about small, repeated actions over time. And repetition requires discipline, not motivation, not inspiration, not waiting until you feel ready. Because if you rely on feelings, you will stop the moment it becomes uncomfortable, and it will become uncomfortable, because building something from nothing always is. Now let's redefine discipline. Discipline is not punishment. It is not forcing yourself into misery. Discipline is alignment, doing what your future requires even when your present resists. That's it. Simple but powerful, because every time you act in alignment with your future, you strengthen it. And every time you choose comfort over alignment, you delay it. Now here's where it becomes real. You already know what you should be doing. You know you should learn more. Build something. Focus your time better. Stop wasting energy on distractions. You know. But knowing is not enough. Because your mind will negotiate. It will tell you, start tomorrow. You deserve a break. It's not the right time. You'll do it later. And later never comes. This is something deeply reflected in discipline-focused thinking, that waiting for motivation keeps you stuck, while action builds progress. So what do? You stop negotiating. You stop asking how you feel. You start acting based on what matters. Because discipline removes emotion from decision-making. It creates stability. And stability creates momentum. Now let's bring this back to your goal. Making money without working requires you to work in a way most people don't. It requires you to build when there is no immediate reward. To stay focused when there is no validation. To continue when nothing seems to be happening. That is where discipline is tested. Not when things are exciting, but when they are silent. Now, here's something powerful. Discipline is not built in big moments. It is built in small decisions. Do you open your phone or your notebook? Do you scroll or build? Do you delay or act? These moments seem small, but they compound because every decision reinforces a pattern, and patterns become identity. So if you want to become someone who builds assets, you must start acting like that person now, not later, not when you feel ready. Now, even in small ways. Now here's a practical shift. Instead of setting big, overwhelming goals, set one non-negotiable action per day. Just one. Something that moves you forward. Something that builds. It could be learning a skill, creating content, studying systems, planning your next move. 1 hour, focused, intentional, because consistency beats intensity every time. Now here's the deeper truth. Discipline is not about control, it is about freedom. Because the more disciplined you become, the less you are controlled by distractions, by impulses, by emotions, by habits that don't serve you. And that freedom creates space, space to think, to build, to grow, and eventually to step out of the cycle you've been in. Here is your next line. Discipline is doing today what freedom depends on tomorrow. Let that stay with you, because in the next chapter, we are going to talk about something that silently destroys discipline, something that keeps people stuck even when they know what to do. We're going to talk about distraction, because in a world designed to pull your attention in every direction, your ability to focus will determine everything. Good. Now we enter one of the most dangerous forces in your life. Not because it's loud, but because it's subtle. Chapter 8. Distraction, the silent thief of your future. There is something stealing your life quietly, not all at once, but piece by piece, minute by minute, decision by decision. And the worst part? Most people don't even realize it's happening. It's not failure. It's not lack of opportunity. It's not even lack of discipline. It's distraction. Because in today's world, distraction is not accidental. It is designed. Every app, every notification, every scroll engineered to capture your attention and keep it. Because your attention is the most valuable asset you own. And if you don't control it, something else will. Now think about this. How many times have you sat down with the intention to build something and ended up consuming instead? How many hours disappear without anything meaningful being created? How many ideas stay ideas because your focus gets pulled away? This is not random. This is a system that rewards your attention being scattered, because scattered people don't build. They react, they consume, they stay in cycles, and cycles keep them dependent. Now here's the truth you need to face. You cannot build a life of freedom with a mind that is constantly distracted. It's impossible, because building requires depth, focus, sustained attention, and distraction destroys all three. Now let's go deeper. Distraction is not always obvious. It doesn't always look like wasting time. Sometimes it looks like being busy, checking messages, responding quickly, jumping between tasks, consuming useful content endlessly. It feels productive, but it's not. Because real progress requires completion. And distraction prevents completion. It keeps you starting, but never finishing, thinking, but never building, planning, but never executing. And that's how years pass, without real change. Now here's something powerful. Distraction is not just external. It is internal. Your mind will create it. It will look for easier options, faster rewards, less resistance. Because building something meaningful is hard. It requires effort, patience, consistency. So your brain tries to protect you by pulling you toward comfort. That's why you reach for your phone. That's why you delay starting. That's why you switch tasks. Not because you're lazy, but because your mind is avoiding discomfort. Now here's the shift. You don't eliminate distraction by removing everything around you. You eliminate it by strengthening your focus. Because even in silence, an undisciplined mind will find ways to escape. So what do? You train your attention just like a muscle. You build your ability to stay with one thing long enough to create something real. This is something reflected in high-performance thinking. That control of your mind determines your ability to perform under pressure and stay consistent. And focus is the foundation of that control. Now let's make this practical. Start with boundaries, simple ones. When you are building, you are not available. No notifications, no multitasking, no switching, just one task, one direction, one intention. Because every time you protect your focus, you strengthen it, and every time you break it, you weaken it. Now here's something deeper. What you consume shapes what you create. If your mind is filled with noise, your output will be scattered. If your mind is filled with clarity, your output will be focused. So be intentional. What are you feeding your mind daily? Because that becomes your thinking, and your thinking becomes your actions. Now let's connect this back to your goal. Making money without working requires you to build something that lasts, something that continues, something that scales. And that kind of creation cannot happen in fragments. It requires depth. It requires presence. It requires focus. So every time you choose to protect your attention, you are investing in your future. And every time you give it away carelessly, you are delaying that future. Now here's your next line. Where your attention goes, your life follows. Let that stay with you. Because in the next chapter, we are going to talk about something even more subtle. Something that quietly keeps people stuck, even when they have discipline, even when they have focus. We're going to talk about fear, because not all limits are external. Some of the strongest ones live inside your mind. And once you understand how fear operates, you stop being controlled by it and start moving through it. Good. Now we step into something deeper than logic, something that doesn't show up on spreadsheets, but controls almost every decision you make. Mate, write which city you're from. It's interesting to see which corners of the world are watching our videos. Chapter 9. Fear, the invisible barrier to financial freedom. There is a moment that stops most people. A quiet moment, a moment where they could move forward, but don't. Not because they lack knowledge, not because they lack opportunity, but because something inside them says, wait. That voice is fear. And fear is not always loud. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. What if this doesn't work? What if you lose money? What if you fail? What if people judge you? What if you're not ready? And those questions feel real, feel logical, feel protective. But most of the time, they are not protecting you. They are holding you in place. Now here's the truth most people never realize. Fear does not disappear when you're ready. It appears when you're about to grow. Let that sink in. Because if you wait until fear is gone, you will wait forever. And that is exactly why so many people stay stuck. They keep preparing, keep learning, keep thinking, but never move. Because fear convinces them that they need more certainty, more clarity, more confidence. But confidence does not come before action. It comes because of action. Now let's break fear down. Fear is not just one thing. It shows up in different forms. Fear of losing money, fear of making the wrong decision, fear of wasting time, fear of being judged, fear of stepping outside what feels safe. And all of these fears have one thing in common. They keep you inside your current identity, inside your current habits, inside your current results. Because staying the same feels safe, even if it's not fulfilling, even if it's not working. Now here's the shift. You don't fight fear by trying to eliminate it. You move through it by changing your relationship with it. Instead of asking, how do I avoid fear? You start asking, what is this fear trying to protect me from? Because often, fear is protecting your comfort, not your future. And comfort is the biggest enemy of growth. Now let's bring this back to money. Most people don't build assets because they fear losing what they already have, even if what they have is not enough. They stay in jobs they don't love because it feels stable. They avoid investing because it feels risky. They delay building because it feels uncertain. But here's the truth. Staying the same is also a risk, a bigger one, because time is moving, whether you act or not. And every year you delay is a year you could have been building something that now compounds. So the real risk is not trying. Now here's something powerful. Fear shrinks when you act. Not completely, but enough. Because action creates evidence. Evidence that you can move, that you can learn, that you can adapt. And that evidence builds confidence. Now think about this. Every skill you have today was once something you didn't know. Every step you've taken once felt uncertain, but you did it anyway. And now it feels normal. That is how growth works. Step by step. Decision by decision. Now here's a practical shift. When you feel fear, don't ask yourself if you're ready. Ask yourself, what is the smallest step I can take right now? Not the big leap, not the perfect plan, just the next step. Because movement breaks fear, stillness feeds it, and the more you move, the less power fear has over you. Now here's something deeper. Fear is often tied to identity. If you see yourself as someone who plays it safe, you will avoid risk. If you see yourself as someone who doesn't understand money, you will avoid learning. If you see yourself as someone who is not ready, you will always delay. So part of overcoming fear is redefining who you are, becoming someone who takes action, who learns by doing, who accepts uncertainty as part of growth. There's a powerful idea in personal development that your life only changes when you take ownership and act, not when you wait for conditions to improve. And fear is often the final barrier before that action. Now here's your next line. Fear is not a stop sign. It's a signal that you're moving forward. Hold on to that, because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that determines whether your efforts actually turn into results. Something that separates those who try from those who build something real. We're going to talk about systems, because effort alone is not enough. You need structure. And once you understand how to build systems, you stop relying on motivation and start creating consistency that works without you. Good. Now we move into the structure behind everything, because without this, even the strongest mindset will collapse over time. Chapter 10. Systems. How money works without you. There is a point in every journey where effort alone is no longer enough. You can be disciplined. You can be focused. You can push yourself every day. But if everything depends on you showing up, you are still in the loop, still trading time, still resetting to zero. And that is where most people stay, not because they lack effort, but because they lack systems. Now here's the truth. Freedom is not built on effort. It is built on systems that reduce the need for effort. Let that settle. Because this is where everything changes. A system is simple. It is a structure that produces a result. With minimal ongoing input from you, it does not rely on your mood. It does not rely on your energy. It does not rely on your presence. It runs consistently, predictably, independently. And when you build systems, you stop working for outcomes and start designing them. Now, think about your current life. How many things stop the moment you stop? Your income, your progress, your output. That's not a system. That's dependency. And dependency creates pressure because you always have to show up, always have to perform, always have to maintain. But systems remove that pressure. They create stability. They create flow. They create space. Now here's the shift. Instead of asking, what do I need to do today? You start asking, what can I build that continues working after today? That question leads you to systems. Now let's break this into something practical. There are simple forms of systems you can start building. A content system. You create once, and it continues to reach people, generate value, and potentially income. A business system. Processes that operate with or without your constant involvement. An investment system. Money that is allocated consistently into assets that grow or produce returns. A learning system. Continuous improvement that compounds your ability to create more value. Each of these systems reduces your dependence on constant effort. Now here's something important. Systems are not built in one day. They are built in layers. You start small, you test, you adjust, you refine, and over time, they become stronger, more efficient, more powerful. But most people never reach that point. Why? Because they quit too early. They expect immediate results. They build something once, and when it doesn't work instantly, they stop. But systems require patience, because in the beginning, they feel like extra work. You are doing the work and building the system. Double effort, little reward. That's the phase most people abandon. But those who continue reach a point where the system starts to carry the load, where effort decreases and output continues. And that is where everything changes. Now let's connect this to your goal. Making money without working is not about doing nothing. It is about building systems that handle the work for you, systems that generate value, systems that create income, systems that operate even when you step away. There is a powerful shift reflected in many success frameworks, moving from doing everything yourself to building structures that produce results independently. And that shift is what creates real freedom. Now here's a key principle. A good system is simple, not complicated, not overwhelming. Simple enough to repeat, simple enough to maintain, because complexity breaks consistency, and consistency is what makes systems work. Now here's something deeper. Systems protect you from yourself, from your moods, from your distractions, from your inconsistency. Because once a system is in place, It continues, even when you don't feel like it. And that stability creates momentum. Now let's make this actionable. Start thinking in systems. Look at your current actions and ask, how can I turn this into something repeatable? How can I make this more efficient? How can I remove myself from this process over time? These questions will start to reshape your thinking from effort to structure, from doing to designing. Now here's your next line. If it depends on you, it's effort. If it runs without you, it's a system. Let that stay with you. Because in the next chapter, we're going to take this even further. We're going to talk about scaling, because building one system is powerful, but learning how to expand it, multiply it, and grow it beyond your original limits, that is where real financial freedom begins to take shape. Good. Now we step into expansion, because building something once is powerful, but multiplying it is where everything accelerates. The Chapter 11, Scaling from Effort to Expansion. There is a moment in every builder's journey where something starts to work, not perfectly, not massively, but enough to prove one thing. It's possible. And that moment is dangerous, because most people stop there. They build one thing, it works a little, and they settle. They treat it like a result, instead of what it really is, a starting point. Because building one system is not the goal. The goal is to scale it. Now let's redefine scaling in a way that actually matters. Scaling is not about doing more work. It is about increasing results, without increasing effort at the same rate. That's the key. Because if your income grows, but your effort grows equally, you're still in the same loop, just at a higher level. But scaling breaks that loop. It allows your output to expand while your input stays controlled. Now here's the shift. Instead of asking, how can I do more? You start asking, how can this do more without me? That question changes everything, because now you're not thinking like a worker, you're thinking like a builder of systems that expand. Now let's make this real. You create something once, content, a product, a system. At first, it reaches a few people, generates a little value, produces small results. Most people stop here, but scaling asks a different question. How can I increase the reach of this? How can I improve the system behind it? How can I allow more people to benefit from the same effort? And this is where leverage returns. Technology, automation, distribution. Because in today's world, you are no longer limited by physical reach. One idea can travel globally. One system can serve thousands. One asset can scale beyond your immediate environment, but only if you build it that way. Now, here's the part most people miss. Scaling requires optimization. You don't just expand blindly. You refine, you improve, you remove inefficiencies, you strengthen what works. Because scaling a weak system only creates bigger problems. But scaling a strong system creates exponential results. Now here's something deeper. Scaling also requires letting go of control, letting go of doing everything yourself. Because if everything still depends on you, nothing can truly scale. You become the bottleneck. And this is where many people struggle. They want growth, but they don't want to release control. They want expansion, but they don't want to trust systems, tools, or people, so they stay stuck, working harder instead of expanding smarter. Now think about this. If your income depends on your direct effort, there is a limit, But if your income comes from something that can reach more people, operate continuously, and grow independently, there is no fixed ceiling. That is the power of scaling. Now here's something important. Scaling is not instant. It follows a pattern. First, you build. Then you test. Then you refine. Then you expand. And each phase requires patience. Because skipping steps creates instability, but following the process creates strength. This idea connects deeply with the concept of building systems and assets that continue producing, not just once, but repeatedly and at increasing levels. Now, let's bring this back to you. You don't need to think about massive scale right now. You just need to start thinking differently. Instead of, how can I finish this task? Ask, how can this task become something repeatable and expandable? That shift alone changes your trajectory. Now, here's a powerful truth. Small systems can become big systems. Small ideas can become large platforms. Small beginnings can lead to massive outcomes, but only if you allow them to grow, and growth requires intention. Now here's your next line. Don't just build something that works, build something that grows. Hold on to that. Because in the next chapter, we are going to talk about something that protects everything you build. Because creating income is one thing, but keeping it, sustaining it, and making sure it continues, that is another level entirely. We're going to talk about protection, because what you build must also be defended. Good. Now, we move into something most people only think about after they lose everything. Friend, write your opinion on this topic in the comments. Do you agree with us or not? I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Chapter 12. Protection. Keeping what you build. There is a hard truth that doesn't get talked about enough. Building income is one level. Keeping it is another. And protecting it, that is a completely different mindset. Because here's what happens to most people. They finally start earning more. They finally build something that works. They finally experience momentum. And then they lose it. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly, through bad decisions, through lack of structure, through overconfidence, because they focused on building but never learned how to protect. Now let's define this clearly. Protection is not fear. It is not avoidance. It is awareness applied to preservation, making sure that what you build continues, grows, and does not collapse under pressure. Now here's the truth. Money that is not protected will eventually disappear. It might take time, it might feel stable, but without structure, without discipline, without boundaries, it will leak, and leaks destroy momentum. Now let's break this down. There are three main areas of protection: financial protection, system protection, mental protection. Let's start with financial. When money starts flowing, the temptation increases to spend more, to upgrade faster, to reward yourself constantly, and this is where most people lose control, because they confuse progress with permission. But progress does not mean you abandon discipline. In fact, it requires more of it, because the more you have, the more responsibility you carry. Now here's the shift. Instead of asking, what can I afford now? You start asking, what needs to be protected first? Savings, investments, reinvestment into assets, because protection comes before expansion, always. Now let's move to system protection. When you build something that works, you must maintain it, refine it, strengthen it, because systems are not set and forget. They require awareness, monitoring, adjustment. Otherwise, they break or become inefficient, and inefficiency kills growth silently. So protecting your systems means staying connected without being dependent, observing without interfering unnecessarily. Now let's talk about the deepest layer, mental protection, because this is where most people fail. Success changes you. It introduces new pressures, new expectations, new distractions. And if your mind is not strong, you will drift, you will lose focus, you will fall back into old habits. This is why controlling your thinking becomes even more important as you grow. There is a principle in personal development that emphasizes guarding your focus and energy as your life evolves. Because what you allow into your mind shapes everything you build. And this applies directly here. Because success without mental discipline is temporary. Now here's something powerful. Protection is not about playing small. It is about building sustainably, because fast growth without structure leads to fast collapse. But steady, protected growth creates lasting freedom. Now let's make this practical. Set boundaries, financial boundaries, spending limits, clear allocation rules, system boundaries, regular reviews, continuous improvement, mental boundaries. Protect your focus, limit distractions, stay aligned with your goals, because boundaries create stability, and stability creates longevity. Now here's the deeper truth. What you build will only last as long as your discipline holds, not your motivation, not your excitement, your discipline, because discipline maintains what motivation starts. Now here's your next line. Building makes you rich. Protecting keeps you free. Hold on to that, because in the next chapter, we're going to go even deeper. We're going to talk about something that determines whether your growth continues or stops completely. We're going to talk about adaptation, because the world is changing fast, and those who cannot adjust will lose everything they built. But those who learn to adapt will continue to grow, no matter what changes around them, good. Now we step into one of the most underestimated abilities, the one that determines whether everything you've built survives or fades. Chapter 13. Adaptation. Staying ahead in a changing world. There is a dangerous assumption people make once things start working. They believe they've figured it out. They believe the system they built will continue the same way forever. They believe what worked yesterday will work tomorrow. And that belief is what eventually breaks them. Because here is the truth. Nothing stays the same long enough for you to stay comfortable. Markets shift. Technology evolves. Opportunities change. Attention moves. And if you are not adapting, you are falling behind, not immediately, but inevitably. Now let's redefine adaptation. Adaptation is not reacting late, it is adjusting early. It is staying aware, staying flexible, staying open to change without losing your foundation. Because adaptation is not about chasing everything new, it is about recognizing what matters and adjusting accordingly. Now think about this. 5 years ago, the way people built income looked different. 10 years ago, completely different. And today, the pace of change is faster than ever. New tools, new platforms, new ways to create, distribute, and scale. And this creates opportunity, massive opportunity, but only for those who are willing to learn and adapt. Now, here's the problem. Most people resist change, not because they don't see it, but because it's uncomfortable. It requires learning. It requires letting go of old ways. It requires stepping into uncertainty again. And after building something that works, that feels risky. So they stay where they are, and slowly, their system becomes outdated. Their results slow down. Their growth stops, and they don't understand why. Now here's the shift. You don't build one system and stop learning. You build a system and continue evolving it, because what works today can always be improved tomorrow. And improvement is what keeps you ahead. There is a mindset reflected in high-performance thinking that staying sharp and adaptable mentally allows you to win even when conditions change. And this applies directly here, because adaptation starts in the mind, your willingness to question, to learn, to adjust. Now let's make this practical. Stay curious. Ask, what is changing in my environment? What tools can make this more efficient? What trends are shaping the future? What skills do I need to stay relevant? These questions keep you moving forward. Now here's something important. Adaptation does not mean abandoning everything. It means refining what works and upgrading what doesn't. Because your foundation matters. Your discipline, your systems, your identity. These do not change, they evolve. Now here's something deeper. The people who succeed long-term are not the smartest, not the fastest, but the most adaptable. Because they don't break when things change. They adjust, they learn, they move forward, and that creates resilience. Now think about your journey. You are not just building income, you are building capability, the ability to create, to adapt, to rebuild if needed, and that is real power. Because once you have that, you are never starting from zero again. Now here's your next line. The goal is not to find something that works forever, but to become someone who can adapt forever. Hold on to that, because in the next chapter, we are going to talk about something that ties everything together, something that determines whether you stay consistent or drift, whether you build long-term or fall into cycles. We're going to talk about environment, because who and what surrounds you quietly shapes everything you become. Good. Now we move into something that quietly shapes everything you do, even when you're not paying attention. Chapter 14, Environment, the Force. You don't notice until it controls you. There is a force influencing your decisions every single day, not loudly, not directly, but consistently. It's not your goals. It's not your plans. It's not even your discipline. It's your environment. The people around you, the conversations you hear, the content you consume, the standards you're exposed to, all of it is shaping your thinking, and your thinking is shaping your life. Now, here's the truth. You don't rise to your intentions. You fall to your environment. Let that sit for a moment, because most people believe they are in control. But they are constantly being influenced by what feels normal, by what feels acceptable, by what everyone else is doing, and slowly, without realizing it, they adjust, they lower standards, they delay action, they normalize stagnation, not because they want to, but because their environment makes it feel okay. Now think about this. If you are surrounded by people who only talk about spending, you will think about spending. If you are surrounded by people who avoid risk, you will avoid growth. If you are surrounded by people who don't build, you will struggle to build, not because you lack ability, but because your environment does not support it. Now here's the shift. You don't wait for your environment to change. You design it intentionally. Because once you understand its influence, you stop treating it casually and start treating it strategically. Now let's break this down. There are 3 layers of environment: physical, social, digital. Your physical environment, where you spend your time. Is it designed for focus or distraction? Is it structured or chaotic? Because your surroundings influence your behavior, your social environment, the people you interact with. Do they think long-term or short-term? Do they build or consume? Do they challenge you or keep you comfortable? Because conversations shape beliefs, and beliefs shape actions. Now your digital environment. This is the most powerful one in today's world. What you scroll, what you watch, what you listen to. Because this is what fills your mind daily, and what fills your mind becomes your thinking. There is a powerful idea often reinforced in growth-focused thinking that protecting your focus and staying intentional about what you consume is critical to long-term success. And this is exactly why. Because your environment is not neutral. It is either pushing you forward or pulling you back. Now here's something important. You don't need to cut everything off. You don't need to isolate yourself. But you do need to be selective, intentional, aware, because even small changes in environment create big shifts over time. Now let's make this practical. Start auditing your environment. Ask yourself, what am I exposed to daily? What conversations am I having? What content am I consuming? What behaviors are being normalized around me? And then ask, is this helping me build or keeping me stuck? Because once you see it clearly, you can change it. Now here's something deeper. Environment affects identity. If you are constantly surrounded by builders, you start thinking like one. If you are surrounded by growth, you start expecting it. If you are surrounded by discipline, you start living it, because humans adapt constantly, and your environment is what you adapt to. So choose it carefully. Now connect this back to your goal. Making money without working requires a different mindset, a different level of thinking, a different set of behaviors. And if your environment doesn't support that, it will pull you back into old patterns. So your job is not just to build systems externally, but to build an environment that supports your internal growth. Because when both align, progress becomes natural. Now, here's your next line. Your environment is either your engine or your anchor. Hold on to that. Because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that determines whether all of this actually becomes real in your life. Something simple, but powerful. Something most people underestimate. We're going to talk about consistency over time, because success is not built in moments. It is built in repetition. And once you understand how to stay consistent, everything you've learned so far starts to compound. Good. Now we arrive at something deceptively simple, but powerful enough to change everything. Chapter 15. Consistency, the quiet force that compounds everything. There is a reason most people never reach financial freedom. It's not because they don't start. It's because they don't continue. They begin with energy. They begin with motivation. They begin with intention. But somewhere along the way, they stop. Not completely, but enough to break momentum. And momentum is everything. Because here is the truth. Success is not built in intensity. It is built in consistency. Let that settle. Because this is where most people get it wrong. They think one big effort will change everything. one big decision, one big move, one big breakthrough. But real change happens quietly, through repetition, through small actions done daily, through showing up, even when nothing seems to be happening. Now think about this. Every system you build requires consistency to function. Every skill you develop requires repetition to improve. Every asset you create requires time to grow. There is no shortcut around this, no hack, no trick, just consistency. Now here's where it gets difficult. Consistency is not exciting. It's not glamorous. It's not something people celebrate because it looks boring, repetitive, unseen. But that's exactly why it works, because most people won't do it. They get distracted, they lose focus, they chase something new, and every time they switch, they reset back to zero. But the person who stays consistent builds momentum, and momentum multiplies results. There's a principle often emphasized in growth-focused thinking that small daily actions repeated over time create massive long-term change. And this is exactly how wealth is built, not in one moment, but in thousands of small ones. Now let's go deeper. Consistency builds identity. Every time you show up, you reinforce who you are becoming. A builder, a creator, a strategist, an identity drives behavior, which drives results. So consistency is not just about actions. It's about transformation. Now here's something important. Consistency does not mean perfection. You will miss days. You will make mistakes. You will lose focus sometimes. That's normal. The key is not to stop, not to break the pattern completely, because progress is not destroyed by imperfection. It is destroyed by inconsistency. Now let's make this practical. Choose one system, one focus, one direction, and commit to it daily, even in small ways, even when results are invisible, because those invisible days are where the real work happens. That's where the foundation is built. That's where the system strengthens. That's where you separate from everyone who quit. Now here's something deeper. Consistency creates trust. Trust in yourself. Because every time you follow through, you prove something. You prove that you can rely on yourself. And that confidence changes everything. Because once you trust yourself, you stop hesitating. You stop overthinking. You start moving with clarity. Now connect this back to your goal. Making money without working requires you to build something that lasts. And lasting things are built through consistency, not bursts of effort, not moments of motivation, but steady, repeated action. Now here's your next line. Consistency turns small actions into unstoppable momentum. Hold on to that, because in the next chapter, we're going to take everything you've learned and bring it into something even more powerful. We're going to talk about time, not how to manage it, but how to use it as a multiplier, because time is not just passing. It is either working against you or working for you. And once you understand how to use time correctly, everything you've built begins to grow faster than you ever imagined. Good. Now, we step into one of the most misunderstood forces in your life. Not because it's complicated, but because most people never learn how to use it. Chapter 16. Time. The multiplier. You either waste or weaponize. Everyone has time. The same 24 hours, the same passing days, the same ticking clock. And yet, some people build freedom while others stay stuck, not because they have more time, but because they use it differently. Now here's the truth. Time does not change your life. What you do with time does, because time is neutral. It does not reward you automatically. It does not care about your intentions. It simply amplifies whatever you consistently do. If you waste it, you get more waste. If you build with it, you get more growth. Now let's go deeper. Most people see time as something to manage, schedules, calendars, deadlines. But that's surface level. The real power of time is in its ability to compound. Because when you combine time with consistency, something powerful happens. Small actions turn into big results. Slow progress turns into momentum. Invisible effort turns into visible outcomes, but only if you stay consistent long enough. Now, here's where most people fail. They underestimate time in the short term and overestimate it in the long term. They expect quick results, fast growth, immediate success, and when it doesn't happen, they stop. They assume it's not working, but the truth is, it was working, just not fast enough for their expectations. And by stopping, they reset the process back to zero. Now think about this. What happens if you build something for 1 week? Not much. 1 month? A little? 6 months? Now you start to see change. 1 year? Now it becomes real. 3 years? Now it becomes powerful. 10 years? Now it becomes life-changing. This is the power of time, but only for those who stay in the game. Now here's the shift. You stop asking, how fast can this work? And you start asking, how long can I stay consistent? Because time rewards endurance, not intensity. Now let's connect this back to money. Making money without working is not about instant results. It is about building something that grows over time, an asset, a system, a structure that starts small but compounds. There is a principle reflected across many growth frameworks. That time, combined with consistent effort, creates exponential results that cannot be rushed. And that's exactly what you're building, not quick income, but lasting income. Now here's something powerful. Time can work against you or for you. If you spend years consuming, you build nothing. If you spend years building, you create something that continues. So the real question is, where is your time going right now? Because your current habits are shaping your future every hour, every day, every decision. Now here's a deeper truth. Time reveals truth. It exposes what you're actually committed to. Not what you say, not what you plan, but what you consistently do. Because over time, there are no shortcuts, only patterns. And patterns create results. Now let's make this practical. Start treating time like an investment. Not something to spend, but something to allocate intentionally. Ask yourself, is this building something or just passing time? Because every hour is either compounding your future or delaying it. Now here's something important. You don't need to change everything. You just need to reclaim part of your time. 1 hour a day, focused, intentional, building. Because that 1 hour over a year becomes hundreds of hours, and those hours can build something real. Now here's your next line. Time doesn't create success. It reveals what you consistently build. Hold on to that. Because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that determines how fast all of this can grow. Something that can accelerate your progress or slow it down completely. We're going to talk about decisions. Because your life is not built on time alone. It is built on the quality of decisions you make with that time. And once you learn how to make better decisions, everything begins to move differently. Good. Now we step into something that quietly shapes your entire life, often without you even noticing it. Chapter 17, Decisions. the small choices that build massive outcomes. Your life is not built in years. It is not built in months. It is not even built in days. Your life is built in decisions, small ones, repeated ones, often unnoticed ones, because every decision you make moves you in a direction, closer to freedom or deeper into dependence. Now, here's the truth. You don't get what you want in life. You get what your decisions create. Let that sit for a moment, because most people live as if big moments define everything. A big opportunity, a big investment, a big breakthrough. But those moments are rare. What defines your life is what you do daily, what you choose when no one is watching, what you choose when it's easy to go the other way. Now think about this. Every time you earn money, you make a decision. Spend it or invest it. Consume or build. Now those decisions feel small, but over time, they create completely different lives. One path leads to constant effort. The other leads to increasing freedom. And the only difference is the decisions made along the way. Now, here's where it gets deeper. Most decisions are not made logically. They are made emotionally, based on comfort, based on habit, based on what feels easy. And that's why people stay stuck, because their decisions are driven by the present, not the future. Now here's the shift. You start making decisions based on alignment, not feelings, not convenience, but alignment with who you want to become. Because when your decisions align with your future, your life starts moving in that direction automatically. There is a powerful idea often reflected in personal growth, that taking ownership of your choices is the starting point of real change, and that applies directly here. Because every decision is a form of ownership. Now let's make this practical. You don't need to make perfect decisions. You just need to make better ones consistently. Instead of asking, "Is this the best choice?" ask, "Is this moving me forward or keeping me where I am?" That question simplifies everything, because most decisions are obvious when you remove emotion. Now here's something powerful. Decisions compound, just like time, just like money. One good decision doesn't change your life, but repeated good decisions create unstoppable momentum. Now think about your current patterns. What decisions are you repeating daily? Are they building something or maintaining something? Are they creating future value or immediate comfort? Because those patterns are your future. Now here's something deeper. Indecision is also a decision. Choosing not to act is still a choice. And often, it's the most expensive one, because it delays everything: progress, growth, opportunity. So learning to decide is just as important as what you decide. Now let's connect this back to your goal. Making money without working is not one decision. It is a series of decisions: to learn, to build, to stay consistent, to invest, to protect, to adapt. And each one moves you closer. Now here's your next line. Your future is not something you reach. It's something your decisions create. Hold on to that, because in the next chapter, we are going to talk about something that accelerates everything you've learned, something that allows you to move faster, learn quicker, and avoid mistakes that cost years. We're going to talk about learning from others, because you don't have to figure everything out alone. And once you understand how to use other people's experience, you shorten your path without reducing your growth. Good. Now we step into something that can collapse years of struggle into months of clarity. Chapter 18. learning from others, borrowing experience to accelerate your path. There is a mistake people make when they decide to change their life. They try to do everything alone. They think, I'll figure it out. I'll learn as I go. I don't need anyone else. And while independence feels powerful, it is also slow, painfully slow. Because here's the truth. You don't get extra credit for struggling longer than necessary. Let that land. Because many people confuse difficulty with value. They believe the harder the path, the more meaningful the result. But that's not always true. Sometimes the smarter path is learning from those who have already walked it. Now think about this. Every mistake you could make has already been made by someone else. Every lesson you need to learn has already been learned by someone else. Every system you want to build has already been built in some form. So the question is not, can I figure this out? The question is, am I willing to learn faster? Now here's the shift. You stop seeing learning as optional and start seeing it as leverage. Because when you learn from others, you borrow their experience. You skip unnecessary mistakes. You move forward with more clarity. And that accelerates everything. There is a principle often reflected in growth-focused thinking, that exposure to the right ideas, voices, and perspectives can dramatically shift your trajectory. And this is exactly why. Because your thinking expands when you are exposed to higher-level thinking. Now let's break this down. Learning from others does not mean copying blindly. It means understanding principles, patterns, frameworks, what worked, and why it worked. Because once you understand the why, you can adapt it to your situation. Now here's something important. Not all advice is equal. Not all voices are valuable. Not all information is useful. So you must be selective, intentional, disciplined, because the wrong input leads to the wrong output. Now here's the shift. You look for people who have built what you want, not those who talk about it, not those who perform success, but those who have created real results, because results leave clues, and those clues can guide you. Now here's something deeper. Learning is not passive. It is active. You don't just consume information. You apply it, you test it, you refine it. Because knowledge without action is just entertainment, and entertainment does not change your life. Now think about your current habits. How much of what you learn do you actually use? How much do you apply? How much do you turn into action? Because that is where the real difference is made. Now here's something powerful. You don't need to learn everything. You just need to learn what is relevant to your current stage. Because trying to understand everything at once creates confusion, but focusing on what matters now creates progress. Now let's connect this back to your goal. Making money without working is not something you guess your way into. It is something you learn from those who have built systems, from those who understand leverage, from those who think long-term. And when you combine that knowledge with your own action, you create something unique, something real, something that works for you. Now here's your next line. You don't need to know everything. You need to learn the right things faster. Hold on to that, because in the next chapter, we're going to take this even further. We're going to talk about something that transforms knowledge into results, something that separates those who learn from those who actually build. We're going to talk about execution, because at the end of the day, nothing changes until you act. Good. Now we arrive at the turning point, the place where everything you've heard either becomes real or stays as another idea that fades. Chapter 19. Execution, Turning Knowledge into Reality. There is a moment that separates two types of people, those who listen and those who act. Both hear the same ideas. Both understand the same concepts. Both feel the same motivation. But only one group moves, only one group builds, only one group changes their life. And the difference is execution. Now here's the truth. Nothing you've learned matters until you act on it. Let that sink in. Because knowledge feels powerful. It gives you clarity. It gives you confidence. It makes you feel like you're progressing. But without action, it changes nothing. Your life remains the same. Now here's where most people get stuck. They wait. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect level of confidence. But perfection is a delay disguised as preparation, because there is no perfect moment. There is only now and what you do with it. Now let's go deeper. Execution is not about massive action. It is about consistent action. Small steps, repeated daily, focused on building something real. Because big actions are rare, but small actions are always available. Now here's the shift. You stop asking, what is the best thing I can do? And you start asking, what is the next thing I can do? That question removes pressure, removes overthinking, removes delay, and creates movement. Because movement creates momentum. Now here's something powerful. Action creates clarity, not the other way around. Most people think they need clarity before they act, but clarity comes from doing, from testing, from learning, from adjusting, and that only happens through execution. Now think about this. Every system you want to build starts with a single action. Every asset begins with a first step. Every change begins with a decision followed by action. There is no other path. Now, here's something deeper. Execution builds confidence, because every time you act, you prove something to yourself. You prove that you can move forward, that you can figure things out, that you are capable, and that confidence makes the next action easier. Now let's connect this to something important. Many people stay in the learning phase. They consume content. They gather ideas. They prepare endlessly, but they never transition to building. And that creates a false sense of progress, because learning feels productive. But without execution, it's just preparation without outcome. There is a principle often reflected in growth thinking, that action is what turns potential into results, not knowledge alone. And this is where most people fall behind. Now let's make this practical. Pick one thing, one idea, one system, one direction, and start. Not perfectly, not completely, just start. Because starting breaks the cycle of delay. Now here's something important. You will make mistakes. You will get things wrong. You will face challenges. That is part of the process. Because execution is not about getting it right immediately. It's about learning faster through action. Now here's a powerful truth. Every mistake you make while executing moves you forward. But every delay keeps you exactly where you are. So the choice is simple. Progress with imperfection, or stagnation with overthinking. Now here's your next line. Action is the only bridge between where you are and where you want to be. Hold on to that, because in the next chapter, we are going to talk about something that determines how long you stay on this path. Something that decides whether you finish or fall back. Chapter 25, The Decision. Where everything changes, you've listened, you've reflected, you've seen things differently. You understand now that making money without working is not about avoiding effort. It is about redirecting effort, building systems, creating assets, thinking long-term, acting with discipline, staying consistent. You've seen the path. But here's the truth. Understanding the path is not the same as walking it. And this, right here, is where most people stop. They feel inspired, they feel motivated, they feel ready. But then, life continues, distractions return, old habits resurface, comfort pulls them back, and nothing changes, not because they couldn't change, but because they didn't decide to. Now here's the reality you need to face. Your life will not change because you listen to this. It will change because you act after this. Let that settle. Because this is not about information anymore. This is about commitment, a decision, a clear, undeniable choice to stop living the same patterns and start building something different. Now ask yourself honestly, are you going to continue the same cycle? Wake up, work, earn, spend, repeat. Or are you going to start building? Even if it's small, even if it's slow, even if it's uncomfortable. Because the difference between those two paths is everything. Now here's something powerful. You don't need to change your entire life today. You just need to make one decision. To start, to take the first step, to follow your blueprint, to commit to consistency, because starting breaks the cycle. Now here's something deeper. This decision is not made once. It is made daily, every time you choose to build instead of consume, every time you choose to focus instead of distract, every time you choose to act instead of delay. That is the real decision. Repeated, reinforced, becoming your identity. Now think about this. 1 year from now, you will be somewhere. That is guaranteed. The question is, will you be in the same place or somewhere completely different? Because time will pass either way, but your direction is your choice. Now, here's the truth most people avoid. There is no perfect moment. No perfect plan, no perfect version of you that suddenly appears. There is only now, and what you choose to do with it. There is a principle often reflected in action-focused thinking that real change begins the moment you take responsibility and move, not when you wait for the right conditions. And this is that moment. Now, here's your final line. The one that should stay with you long after this ends. You don't change your life when you feel ready. You change your life when you decide you're done staying the same. Pause. Let that sink in. Because this is your turning point. Now before you go, make this real. If something in this journey resonated with you, don't just move on. Make a quiet commitment to yourself. Not for anyone else, not for validation, but because you know you are capable of more. And if you're ready, leave a comment with one decision you're making today, one action you will take, one step you will not delay, because speaking it makes it real. And if you know someone who is still stuck in the cycle, share this with them, not to impress them, but to help them see what you've just seen. And if you want to stay on this path, stay consistent. Keep learning, keep building, keep evolving, because this is not the end, this is the beginning. Now tell me, what do you want the next audiobook to be about? Your answer might be the next journey we take together.